Can't even find the... Oh, yeah. Just when I was way too busy with records, Ohio State and Clemson over the last hour. So please check those out. They'll be released later today. Ohio State Clemson talk coming off their spring games. But just when I thought I was too busy, had too many things going on, that it was impossible for me to figure out what the topic of today's SEC live show would be, boom, the FPI comes out. Oh, one of my favorite topics, the FPI released by ESPN. The only thing that I regret is that I had not kept some kind of a journal through the years to determine the fallacies and to track the fallacies of the FPI. I am sure that a lot of really smart people put together the Football Power Index. I am pretty sure of that. However, much like the BCS formula, in certain respects, there are some grave fallacies to all of this. And that is coming from a person who does not know exactly what the formula is. I don't know that anyone knows the formula per se of the FPI. What I do know is that the result is in the rankings, of course, and those results often make no sense. We appreciate all of you being here at the Voice of College Football, and I am hurriedly looking to correct this color scheme that is spitting out Clemson orange, and nothing wrong with our Clemson friends, especially Jason Priester, who we appreciate coming on to talk Clemson football each and every week. And again, those videos will be released later today. And of course, we've got our Clemson show featuring Tiger Paw Craven and Jordan Bowman every Thursday night over on the Clemson channel at 9 Eastern. So check that out. But for the voice of college football, we've got to go with the color scheme. And so let's get that corrected as we prepare to. I'll be kind. We're not going to tear to shreds the FPI. Again, I'm sure there's a lot of smart people that are putting together and inputting a lot of valid data, but there is something seriously wrong with this. And again, I would love to have tracked my thoughts and my perspective on the FPI and what I appeared and what I determined to be glaring issues with the FPI, whether that was the FPI preseason or that was the FPI once we got into play. You know, one in particular is after Clemson destroyed Oklahoma, and either the college football playoff year of 2015 or the previous season when they just blasted them in the Russell Athletic Bowl by 35 points. And then they had a better record that the FPI still insisted that Oklahoma was a better team. One of those two seasons, that was the outcome of the FPI. Other notable FPI blunders that come to mind. As I search for more graphics that I need, would be the season in which this was the Justin Fields first season at Ohio State. And of course, we know the story of Justin Fields. We know that he was inexperienced. We know that he transferred from Georgia to Ohio State. And from what I gather concerning the FPI, there's a lot of weight given to coaching changes, which I get. However, there has to be an evaluation of the incoming coach, of course, or the outgoing coach. A lot of really good coaches have been fired. A lot of really good coaches have moved on, of course. We've seen that just this past off season 1 year ago. Brian Kelly, Lincoln Riley, Mario Cristobal. So there has to be an evaluation of the outgoing coach and the incoming coach. I don't know if it's detailed to that degree or there's just a factor that is a set generic factor that says you lost your coach, you're getting a new coach, therefore we're going to knock you down 0.72. I don't know that. But obviously that doesn't make any sense because there has to be an evaluation of previous coach versus incoming coach. Same thing with the quarterback play. This is another factor that I've always been told about the FPI, and I've looked at the formula, but it's been years, so I should go back to that, especially if we're going to make this the cornerstone of this particular live show. And I know SEC fans that this is your show. This is the SEC live show right here at the Voice of College Football every Tuesday at noon Eastern time. But void of any SEC content in particular, we have certainly sent our link out to our various SEC contributors. So we expect a number of them to join us as we do each and every week. So we will have SEC football talk for all of you. And I've got my notes from this week, courtesy my source who provides me SEC football notes each and every day. So we appreciate that. But this caught my eye while I was recording Ohio State and Clemson here in the last 45 minutes. And we got to jump on the news when the news is released. And this becomes news because ESPN is the dominant force in college football, and this is their power index. The other notable history lesson in all this was the Justin Fields season at Ohio State in 2019. So that was also notable, of course, because Urban Meyer coached in 2018, handed things to Ryan Day for 2019. So you had a coaching change and you had a new quarterback. I get the instability or the speculation that can be made anytime there's a coaching change, especially with a first-time head coach. We have seen first-time head coaches succeed in this sport time and time again. Experience is valuable. Experience is vital at times, depending on what you're doing. But in college football, we've seen Ryan Day excel at Ohio State. We've seen Lincoln Riley take the job at Oklahoma and excel, and others. Dabo Swinney at Clemson as a first-time head coach, not a guy that had a group of 5 program and showed that he was ready. Tom Herman excelled at Houston. He's ready for the Texas job. Well, maybe he's not. Dabo Swinney, Lincoln Riley, Ryan Day in particular, first-time head coaches. Maybe they should coach at the lower level of the Power 5 or the Group of 5. Nope. They are ready to go, and they can excel and succeed and be top-flight coaches. So the coaching change factor in this, maybe it should be evaluated through the years. I don't know if the FBI has evolved based on data that's been inputted, data that has been displayed by actual reality. Okay, we at one point thought that this was important. However, look at all these other things that have transpired to show us that maybe this factor is not that important, or vice versa. We didn't really consider this to be a main component 10 years ago, but look at what has played out over the ensuing years to show us that this is important. For example, at one point, tracking starters returning for the next season, and I'm not saying that that's completely invalid, because it's not, because starters are typically the players that factor the most into the success of your team the next season. However, we all know, because of various packages on offense and defense, that being a starter isn't necessarily the most important component returning to a football team the next year. We saw an Ohio State team, this was in 2016, that was the youngest football team, the least experienced football team in the country, not just in the Power 5, the least experienced team in the country, and they still beat Michigan, Oklahoma, Wisconsin on down the line and went to the college football playoff as the Big Ten champion. Because you know what? They were uber talented. And I'm still going to finish my point about the Ryan Day, Justin Fields team of 2019 when they were filling their roles for the first time. The FPI, in all its wisdom, projected Ohio State to finish, I believe, somewhere between 7-5 and 8-4. Because obviously when you work with computers, you're going to make a projection that's not going to be dead on. They're going to go 11-1. They're going to go 10-2. They're going to go 9-3. So, for example, in the FPI for 2023, Ohio State is projected against its schedule to go 11.8 and 1.0. Why does that not make sense? Well, it actually does make sense. So on the surface, you would think, okay, this is a regular season. It has to be a regular season projection, because you cannot project who teams are going to play in a conference championship game or in a bowl game. So it has to be a regular season. So it would have to add up to 12, right? Well, no, there's a projection that most of the time Ohio State's going to advance to the Big Ten championship game. Therefore, they're going to play a 13th game, but they're not always going to project to the Big Ten championship game. Therefore, they're basically telling us at 11.8 and 1.0 in the loss column. And I'm sure that those numbers are much, much more complicated than that. They probably go about 18 decimal points, but that's rounded off. That's telling us that Ohio State, based on the FPI, is going to advance to the Big Ten championship game. Do the math with me. Does anybody have a number? I'm going to test your math. We're going to do a little math class here before we continue. Okay. According to the FPI, Ohio State projected to go 11.8 in the win column, 1 in the loss column. That's 12.8 games in a 12-game regular season. Obviously, they're projecting out to the Big Ten championship game. So, according to the FPI, what is the likelihood that Ohio State's going to the Big Ten championship game? Anybody? I'm curious. This is like those man on the street questions that you see where they track down like college kids and they ask them who George Washington is or when World War II ended, and they say, 1980, or they say George Washington, was, the King of England. All right. We've got our buddy Ty Hudson on the line, and we don't want to delay him anymore. He's a busy man. Ty's here to talk some Arkansas football. Ty, what's going on?
How you doing, Mark? How's it going, man?
I'm doing just fine. I'm ripping on the FPI right now.
I caught some of that. Sounds like you're going in good.
I gave everyone a math computation to make, and I'm holding out for that. So we'll pick that up once we get done talking some Arkansas football with you. How was the spring game? Sorry to catch you midstream on the gulp there.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. I take quick gulps. Taking quick gulps. And
you got to in this business.
That's right. I'm drinking sugar-free here, the Monster Tea Lemonade. No sugar. Does have 7 grams. Oh, I'm sorry. It does have 3 grams. My bad. 3 grams. False advertisement there. So just giving you guys a heads up. This stuff is delicious. Once it hits the lips, it's delicious. No, the spring game was about what I thought it would be. I think Sam Pittman kind of wrestles with himself a little bit as far as like what he wants to do, right? I think it was 110 plays total. It was about what I expected, not that it wasn't good or bad. It was what you would expect a spring game to be under Sam at Arkansas.
I stopped by the big show for a few minutes yesterday. So it is Tuss Talk with Ty right here on YouTube. So check it out. The best way is just to go over there and subscribe, hit the bell for the notifications. That way you can keep up with Ty when he decides to go live.
Yeah, which will be a lot. I shouldn't say a lot less. It's going to be less. It's, because I focus on just one school. I don't focus on the SEC. So it's going to be a little bit less lives. I do plan on uploading some shorts and some edited content. We have some controversy on Hog Twitter. I shouldn't say controversy, but we have people tweeting about KJ being a Heisman candidate. And I'm like, I'm having to get people to pump the brakes just a little bit on that. So I've kind of thought about doing a video on his odds of being a Heisman candidate, not a winner, but just a candidate in this new offense under Dan Enos. So, but yeah, it's there. I've got Otis Kirk coming on tomorrow. We did 2 shows yesterday, one Patreon show, and then I just did my typical Monday show. We had QB Spotlight on. Stephen Hamner, who's great. He did such a good job kind of breaking down what he saw in the spring game. And, I think I'm getting Blake Level on, too, to talk a little Razorback basketball. That might be a Patreon chat as well. So trying to stay busy.
Unfortunately for KJ Jefferson, we know that in college football, unlike in the NFL, and I know that you're an NFL fan, when we vote for the NFL MVP, when the voters that be vote, they basically they don't care how good the player was prior to the season. There's not a list of MVP candidates in the NFL.
Yeah.
There's not a preconceived notion that these guys, sure, you got your eye on Aaron Rodgers and Pat Mahomes, of course.
Right.
Because who they are, because they've proven it. But there's not like this, there's the Nagurski Award watch list. There's the Doak Walker Award watch list. There's this predetermined list of we've got to watch these guys this season. Yeah. And I get it to a certain extent. There's so many teams that you've got to kind of narrow it down to, okay, let's focus on these guys. But the point I'm getting to is that KJ Jefferson kind of has to outplay the field to get into the running. There are predetermined in people's minds best players in college football. And certainly he's got a track record. He's not coming out of nowhere. But if he was the front runner coming into the season, then he would just kind of have to maintain that post position. But he's got to outplay the field. And that's either, in my mind, Ty, when it comes to what determines Heisman trophies, is a combination of the team's success, of course. Number 2, statistics. And number 3, highlight real plays. Like if he
Yes.
does something, if he pulls out an 80-yard drive in the final minute against Bama and leaps over 3 guys into the end zone to win the game, then suddenly, boom, okay. Yeah. Everybody's watching that play.
Who was the last kind of untraditional school to win the Heisman? Like who was the last Heisman winner?
2011 Baylor. That's the first one that comes to mind. Let me go through the years. I think he would be the one.
I'd probably argue to some degree maybe Marcus Mariota at Oregon in 2014. Okay. But Oregon at that time had kind of turned things around thanks to the offense and what was going on, and of course the big Nike sponsor. Now you consider Oregon a school that should be in that mix. Maybe Lamar Jackson at Louisville.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's a good one. That was the first one I thought of. Was
and that's a good one too. It is.
You're right, Lamar Jackson.
Baylor, Oregon, and Louisville. Those are not 3 schools. I'm pretty sure. Well, I better watch what I'm about to say. I was going to say I think those are all first-time winners for their school, or those schools to win a Heisman. I could be wrong on that.
You would be right for Louisville and Baylor for sure. I believe Oregon had a. I'll have to double check on that.
If you go throughout all of history, I mean, of course. See, and I get kind of jumpy on. Traditional college football, like I forget stuff. But you had Ty Detmer at Brigham Young in 1990.
Yes. I believe I can name all the Heismans going back to the late 50s.
That's ridiculous. That's crazy. See, I had a list pulled up here and I'm trying to find it, but I remember those are names I had jotted down because again, I'm thinking about getting this edited content out. But I mean, again, if you look at all the traditional Heismans, it's Alabama, of course, Oklahoma, LSU, USC's got at least
8 total all time. USC's got 8. So last season was the tiebreaker. You had USC, Notre Dame, Ohio State with 7. Oklahoma might have 7 as well. And then USC broke the tie last year.
See, that's crazy. And Arkansas's only ever had 1 finalist. And he did it twice. Darren McFadden, who was the Doak Walk Award winner back-to-back years. And, of course, he didn't get it his sophomore year because we were told, well, he's a sophomore. And then the next year, of course, arguably, this isn't me, one of the greatest college athletes to ever play, according to a lot of national media folks, Tim Tebow in 2007, who won it as a sophomore, ironically. But yeah, so the point that I'm making and what I'll probably make in that video is that it is an uphill battle for someone at a school like Ole Miss, Mississippi. I would even argue Tennessee, Arkansas. It's just an uphill battle. You have to have name recognition. You have to have the big plays and the big moments. You got to win games. You can't go 6-6. I would even argue an 8-win team, you're going to struggle with an 8-win team to be in that conversation. Now, Darren McFadden had some success with that, but if I remember right, they went 8-4 in 2007, but I might be getting that mixed up.
So was he 06, 07 or 05, 06?
He was 05, he was a freshman. 06, he was a sophomore. 07, he was a junior.
And the 06 team lost to Florida in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, that was a roller coaster ride of a year. A lot of ups, just a couple of downs, and Hog fans swear up and down that Darren McFadden should have won at least one of those Heismans. I think there's certainly a debate to be had there, but
absolutely.
SEC is what it is, man, and that's the difference between like a Marcus Mariota at Oregon. Again, I know you and I, we managed to make people in Iowa apparently pretty upset, but the SEC is what it is, and the strength of schedule here is ridiculous, and you are going up against the best of the best, so it's harder. The climb is harder for someone unless you're a Mark Ingram, right, a Cam Newton, a Johnny Manziel, a Derrick Henry. These are all Heisman winners, unless you're those guys from those prestigious schools where you have more of those big moments. And guess what? When you're at a school like Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Florida, whatever, you're more likely to have those games that are gonna have national recognition. Whereas when Arkansas plays Alabama, the expectation is, well, they're just going to get blown out, and you're not going to have the same kind of light on you, right? You're not going to get the same kind of media attention unless you do the unthinkable, which is beating Alabama and having some key Heisman moments in that game. And then, of course, like I said, and like you mentioned, you got to have the stats and the wins to back all that up. It's hard. It's hard to do. And the Heisman is what it is. I don't think the best player wins it every year. I don't.
No.
I know you agree with that, but I don't even know that I give it the same kind of merit anymore. I really don't. I know it should, but it's I don't know. I think there's I just don't buy into the Heisman like I used to. I just don't. It's great, and if KJ does do it, God, it would be incredible. That means they probably went on to win 10, 11 games, and he had an incredible year. And, he's going to break some records at Arkansas this year. Don't ask me what they are. I just know there's some records he's supposed to beat. I think there's like a total yardage record or something. Maybe it's a total career touchdown record. I don't know what it is, but he's poised apparently to break at least one, maybe two records, maybe more.
To me, the Heisman is the most prestigious award in sports. However, I also think that based on the way I led into this conversation, it's also one of the most flawed in its voting. And it's also difficult because it's compared against the professional ranks where you have a smaller group of players that play very equal schedules and opponents, and all of that can be judged much more easily than trying to judge an Oregon quarterback against an Arkansas running back, against an Ohio State wide receiver, against a this or that, or a defensive player that comes out of nowhere and just has this crazy good year. But how do you rate that against an offensive player and all of that?
Yeah. I mean, you hit it on the head right there. When you talk about defensive players, why aren't defensive players more recognized in the Heisman? Why have we only had?
It's supposed to be the best player.
It is, and it's quarterback, running back every year, and that's why I'm losing my interest in it because it's been that way for decades, right? I mean, I don't even know. Again, you would know this. How many defensive players have ever made the short list? Who in the modern era, which I would consider the 2000s, how many of them have made the trip to New York outside of Ndamukong Suh out of Nebraska?
Yeah,
who I think probably should have won it. Charles Woodson, of course, at Michigan.
Yeah, and then you get into the whole portion of it that, and I don't want to see this, but NFL talent evaluators would tell you who the best players are in terms of how they're projecting toward the NFL. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I think Will Anderson was the best player on the planet 2 years ago in college football.
Say that again now.
Will Anderson was not invited to the Heisman finalists. He didn't quite make it.
And he's a top 3 pick in the draft, unless he slid a little bit. I think last I saw he was somewhere in the top. I thought he was in the top 3. He might have slid back a little bit.
So we'll see how that goes. But that's good off-season content, talking about KJ Jefferson and what he needs to do to get into the Heisman race. I think the team needs to be reasonably good. I don't think they need to make a run for the national championship, but 10-2, like they got to stretch it pretty high, I think, to get him to New York.
It's gonna be a lot. And here's the other thing too. And I was thinking about this actually after the spring game. And I had a conversation again with Stephen Hamner from QB Spotlight. You guys need to go subscribe to his channel. He does incredible work. Mark, I think you may have had him on here, or I don't know.
Who are we talking about?
Stephen Hamner from QB Spotlight. He's a friend of the channel. He's he went to the Elite 11 camp on Sunday. He works for an organization that trains athletes, pitchers, quarterbacks. He played college quarterback, small Division II school. Knows his stuff, man. I love talking football with that guy. He can just analyze. We actually in our Patreon chat, we did a whole play-by-play from the scrimmage, just him kind of breaking down what he was seeing. It was awesome. But he and I were talking about this a little bit, and I got to thinking about this after the spring scrimmage. KJ's in a new offense that's going to utilize his strengths differently. And you can argue that KJ is an RPO purist. Or a quarterback purist. Maybe that's not the right. He's suited for the RPO. Enos is not going to run the RPO 100% of the time or 75% of the time like Kendall Briles did. It's going to be more about, I mean, they're lining up under center, right? They're lining up. They are in shotgun. They're doing pistol. They'll have trips right. They'll have a couple guys lined up. They'll run 2 tight end sets under center, in shotgun, whatever. But it's more about what's happening after the snap, and the reads are going to be different. You don't have that RPO to kind of, to maybe you get the defense to misdirect and go the wrong way, and all of a sudden your read is a little bit easier to make because, you make that initial read and make the play, let go of the ball or whatever, tuck it, run it, keep it, whatever you want to do with it. And now it's more of a pro style offense. So maybe and I said this on the Patreon show, I think he ends up throwing more interceptions this year. Not a lot more, not double. I think he's thrown 10 his whole career, 9. I'm not saying he's going to do that in this. He might do it in a single season, but maybe not. We'll see. The offense is going to be different, and we saw that in the spring game. We saw that through spring camp. The reads are going to be different. The way the offense is set up, the way it's called, it's a little bit slower paced. Something, again, Steven brought up. One of the first things he said when I asked him what stood out to you, he said it's slower. Now, that is a red-white scrimmage, and as well as I do, that doesn't mean anything. They may try to really up the tempo and fall during fall camp and when the season comes around. So, yeah, there's so many different angles and different ways of looking at what KJ's ceiling is in terms of accolades. But it's going to be fascinating to watch how it unfolds. And it's going to be an interesting conversation to have, like you said, during the offseason. Should make for some pretty good content.
Well, here's another one for you, because I jumped on here and again, didn't have a particular topic for this show and was running around doing all sorts of records, so didn't have 3 seconds to think about it. And we do an SEC show here every Tuesday at noon. So whatever flies out of my mouth is typically what we're going to talk about. But I caught this FPI right before we jumped on. And so I have a long running issue with the football power index not being reasonable. Of course, it's going to be off. As a preseason ranking, we cannot project. There are going to be teams that are going to elevate and teams are going to decline. I have no issue with that. It's not a prediction that needs to be perfect. Nobody is, and nobody can devise that system. However, some things just absolutely don't make sense. And when you jumped on, I was in the middle of a tirade pointing out, I wish I would have kept a journal to kind of journal all the FPI just blatant mistakes or inconsistencies. But I haven't. But I still have about 5 that come to mind that I was rolling through.
So that said, you're talking about the ESPN FPI, the Football Power Index?
Yes.
Okay. We have a saying on our show, and Haas is in our chat, and he says the FPI is, I don't know if you like that word or not, but the FPI is cheeks. We'll say that. Disregard it. I don't fully throw it away, but
I do disregard it. I don't reference it at all during the season. I reference it right now because it's something that people look up. Like if I'm going to post a video and say that the FPI sucks, then people are going to watch that video. And if I legitimately, if I legitimately have gripes against if I thought that the FPI was, of course, it's not going to be infallible, but if I didn't think it was highly flawed, I would leave it alone, or I would just mention it when people would ask me about it. But I just think there are serious issues with it. And again, had I tracked them through the years, I'd have a list of 47, but I've got about a list of 5 in my head of just blatant, just inconsistencies and components that don't make any sense. That said, this is an SEC show, and we've got our guy, Ty Hudson from Tusk Talk with Ty right here on YouTube. So I'm going to throw the Arkansas FPI at you.
Okay.
So ESPN is telling us that Arkansas is the 30th best team in the country.
So what, like a 7-5 record?
Well,
I mean, has it gotten that far yet? Has
yeah.
it gotten projections?
So what it does, and I have no issue with this, because you certainly can be a really good team that plays a murderer's row, and that's going to affect your final record, or vice versa, play an easy schedule and not be as good, and that's going to affect it. So the FPI rankings don't necessarily line up with their record projections for that very reason, and that makes total sense. So for Arkansas, so for example, they've got LSU as a better team than Texas, but with a worse record because LSU plays in the SEC. Makes total sense. I have no issue with that portion of it. However, they've got Arkansas, let's see, at number 30. Your record is going to be 6.8, 5.2 in the loss column. So rounded off 7-5.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I'm not going to tear that to shreds. I haven't done a deep dive on Arkansas. I don't have any strong opinion, but that sounds about right.
Well, you asked me last time I was on, and I hadn't given it any real thought, and I still haven't yet, because I'm gonna do my too early pick, my too early wins and losses projection here in the next, I don't know, May, maybe going into June. But you asked me, and I said, I don't know, 8 wins, I think is what I said.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's not terrible. You know, I am looking at it here, and they've got A&M at 60, almost 62% favored over Arkansas.
Oh, they've got the individual games out.
They do.
Okay.
Yeah. They have the match.
That'll
the
be a
matchup
fun one for me to go through as well. Yeah.
So I mean, and I don't know. One of the reasons why I do bring it up during the season is because, again, it's just like, if they're giving you, the way I look at it, if the FPI, the Football Power Index, is giving you a 40% chance to beat Bama, which they're not for Arkansas, it's probably like 10% here. Actually, let me look at it. Yeah, it's 6.2%. But if they're giving you at Tuscaloosa a 40% chance of winning that game, I mean, that means they're giving you a shot, a really healthy shot at beating Alabama. Now, nobody, or rarely does anyone have that kind of percentage on Alabama and Tuscaloosa. I don't know that that's happened in a while. That's the way I look at it. I don't look at it as this is them saying this is just what it is, right? Like, I just see it as almost like an aid. Like, if you're really into the gambling, right? Maybe the FPI, and that's kind of why. And I'm not a gambler. I was raised Baptist. Okay, it's a big no-no around here, along with dancing sexually with a partner, or drinking alcohol, or saying the Lord's name in vain, right? Like, that's stuff you don't do down here in Arkansas because we're Baptist primarily.
Well, I certainly have my various priority list when it comes to all those things, but some of those things I certainly partake in. But
right. And that's fine. But yeah, that's the way I look at the FPI. It's like here's kind of how we're at, you know, the percentage of, or the likelihood of you beating someone. And if you were to get 40% against Bama and Tuscaloosa, well, the odds are they're going to have you favored heavily in a lot of other games. Just simply because. And by the way, did they used to say the way they did the FPI was based on simulations? And is that still how they do it?
Oh, they run simulations. Yes. And that's why they come out with Arkansas is going to win at Alabama 6.2% of the time, because they ran 1,000 or 10,000 simulations.
Interesting.
You know what goes heavily into this, and again, I'm no expert on the FPI formula. I do know that quarterback changes, coaching changes are pretty prominently factored in. And what I was stating at the time that we brought you in was, I would like to know if they've adjusted this system through the years. If it's really a good system that they just don't want to have be a platform for discussion to draw people in to click on their site, but they want it to be a legitimate system, then they would be tracking these various components to see, are they truly as important as we think they are? And after it, I don't know how long this thing's been in existence, at least 10 years, that they would be saying, okay, we thought in 2012 that this was important, but things have changed in college football, or we just were in error. Therefore, we've got to minimize this component. We've got to improve or give more weight to this component because reality has proven this, or that.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've done that.
I don't know either. And I was thinking about it too. Like, if they're doing these simulations, listen, I play college football revamped, the NCAA 14 on consoles, right? I play those. I build my roster the way I see fit. How do they take that into account? Like, where would they rate KJ Jefferson? How does he factor into that simulation? And we've seen what KJ does. I don't know that that's something you can simulate. I don't know if it's something we damn sure know it's something you can't emulate. Coaches have talked about, how do you, when we scrimmage or when we prepare for something like Arkansas, we don't have a 6'3", 200 and however many pounds, 235, 240 pound player that can do the things that KJ can do. He put this team on his shoulders. I mean, he averaged something like 14 carries a game last year for Arkansas. He was 75% of their offense week in and week out. Like, how do they factor that into the simulations, right? I wanted to answer this question about Criswell, if I could.
Absolutely.
Since it's a super chat question for you. Will Criswell have a chance to start? No. Only if, again, God forbid, knock on wood, if something happens to KJ. That's the only way. Criswell did get better, Mark, through camp. My first impressions of him the first 2 weeks, I kind of thought, man, I don't know. He may not be QB2. Cade Fortin, I don't know how many different schools he's transferred to now. I think Arkansas school 3 or 4, but he was here last year. He kind of knows what Sam Pittman wants. Of course, new coordinator, but he knows what Sam Pittman's looking for. He looked pretty steady through spring camp. Criswell gradually got better and better and better. And then if anyone watched, the scrimmage, you saw a little bit there what everyone got to see during spring camp that was there. He got better. He got way better. I think if he's not QB2, he's on the heels of Cade Fortin. I was pretty impressed with him the last several times I saw him throw the ball through spring camp. So he's going to fight. And at the moment, I would argue, assuming KJ leaves, because believe it or not, he has another year of eligibility. I'm 90% positive on that because of the COVID year. If KJ's gone, which I imagine he probably will be after this season, we'll see. I expect him to be the next guy up. So, and you saw it. Anyone who watched the scrimmage, you saw tidbits of what he's capable of doing. And it is something else entirely to do it against someone else, against an opponent, on a Saturday in front of 70,000 people. But he's certainly going to be in that conversation for QB2. And I think he ends up getting it.
We got Ty Hudson here from Tusk Talk with Ty. It's right here on YouTube. Check it out. It's easy to find. We will drop the link in the chat. And you know what's hitting me? It hit me about 15 minutes ago during the conversation about the FPI, but didn't get around to mentioning it. You know what is weighted heavily in this? Recruiting rankings. That's what's weighted extremely heavy in this. This is telling us who the most talented teams in the country are.
You're talking about the FPI?
With some tweaks, yes.
Okay.
I think they lean heavily on that. I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think so too. And based on what some of these teams did a year ago, of course, right? Yeah, when I bring up FPI, I try to tell people, like, don't take it too seriously, but
no, don't do that.
Don't do that. But if you're a gambler, maybe it'll kind of help you rethink your what you're doing, maybe, to a degree. I don't know. That's about as much that's about as serious as I could take it. And I've kind of wondered if they don't just eventually leave that format entirely. If they don't do something else, what they could do exactly, I don't know. Or at least be more transparent about how they come to the conclusions that they come to. Because I don't know about you, Mark. I don't think they're really that transparent. It's like, here it is. And that's it. That's what you get.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a formula somewhere. For some reason, I think that there is. But again, I don't know.
Yeah. Who runs the ESPN simulation? Probably Heather Dinich. A damn beast media. What's up, man? How you doing? It's good to see you. I got your DM a little while back. We'll have to stay in touch.
Good stuff. Yeah, when Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia are well out in front of everyone else, there's like a 5-point drop from Georgia to LSU. And I get that. I think Georgia's the best team in the country, and I need to be proven otherwise. But Ohio State's number one here. Ohio State had an extremely flawed defense last year. They lost their quarterback, who might be the best quarterback in the country, and they lost their 3 best offensive linemen. I don't think they should be number one in the FPI by any stretch.
So you think it should be Georgia?
I would go Georgia 1, Bama 2, and then I would have a wrestling match between Ohio State and Michigan at 3.
I'll be honest, I haven't done enough digging yet. I'm coming up on I'm planning on taking a week off. Of course, you know how that goes.
Yeah.
What we do. Like, there's no such thing. But it's like I tell people, trying to explain to my dad, like, I don't work a 9 to 5. I work a 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. and just whatever happens in between. Like, that's what I work. I mean, but I'm going to try and take a week, maybe a week and a half off, and then come back to it and really start to dig into all these teams. But from what I do know, I agree with you. I'd probably put Georgia at number 1. I don't know about the rest just yet, but Georgia, the on switch is flipped on for them, and it's they're looking to build a dynasty. Like, they're legit, man. It's kind of it, and it's when you consider what Mark Richt did there, with the crazy good recruiting. I always thought it was a matter of time. I remember when they lost to West Virginia in the Peach Bowl or something, and I remember just being shocked after they went like 11-1 or 10-2.
The Sugar Bowl 05.
Was it Sugar Bowl? Okay. Yeah. All right. I get them all. That was my partying time. 03 to 05, whatever. But yeah, that really to me was like, whoa, wait a minute, because I thought Georgia was just the sleeping giant, along with Clemson, by the way. They were recruiting really, really well for years, and they would go 8-4, 9-3 or whatever, 7-5. They'd have these really strange years despite recruiting constantly in the top 5, top 10. And then they woke up, right? And then the same thing happened with Georgia. So, of course, it's the team out of the SEC that looks like it's going to be able to extend its dominance. And I agree. I think Georgia. I would put Georgia number 1. I don't know. Again, don't know about number 2, 3, 4, and 5, but Georgia would be my number 1.
Ty Hudson. It's a Tusk Talk with Ty. It's right here on YouTube. We will make sure that we drop the link in the chat so everybody can follow Ty on over there. Ty, appreciate you stopping by, man.
Yeah, man. Always a blast, Mark.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
You too.
We keep the SEC talk rolling here on the SEC Live Show right here at the Voice of College Football. We do this each and every Tuesday. We talk SEC football, of course, every day with all of you, but this is devoted to the SEC. And we've got one of our guys stepping in here, Kyle Loomis from E2C Network, tracking Auburn, everything Auburn on the E2C Network. Kyle, how you doing today?
Doing very well. Just happy to be done with spring football and move on to the next phase of things and just start the speculation season, the talking season, they call it in college football, especially for Auburn, with a lot of questions still out there.
Well, exactly what is the talk after a couple of weeks to review the spring game and everything that happened in the spring. And again, to somewhat de-emphasize actually what happened in the spring game, but maybe look at it in context with the other 14 practices and everything that's going to take place as the team prepares to hit it hard here this summer.
Yeah, listen, this A-Day was literally a wash. And I mean that literally. I don't know who all followed it outside of the Auburn family group, but we had rain like no other. I cannot remember an A-Day. We've had bad weather just in general in spring games, but nothing like this where it was just constant rain, downpours at time. Miserable experience if you were a fan there at the game. And it looked at times to be miserable for the players out there too, seeing as how they cut the game a little bit short. So I say all that because it was hard to really know what to take away from this game. Here's what I can tell you. It ended in a 24-24 tie, offense versus defense. So take that as you will, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. There was not a lot of throwing. There was a lot of running the ball. There was a lot of running from some backup guys in the depth charts. And, you usually see that in spring games too. So that's not a shock, but those really shined. But really, there wasn't a lot of excitement to it, except the fact that it was I guess if you think it's cool, 24-24 tie at the end of this thing. It left a little bit to be desired. But Coach Freeze said coming into this game, temper your expectations. We are not revealing much because that's the one thing that we have at our advantage right now. Of course, they've seen tape on Hugh Freeze and what he likes to do, but they don't know exactly what he's going to do at Auburn with the skilled players that they have here, what they can potentially accomplish there. So they don't want to show their hand too early, especially in a first transition year where you're trying to get your feet set on the ground on a new foundation. So that was already going to be not much shown in that game, but I think it was even less because of the conditions, keeping in mind of injuries and things like that. So I hate to use the word boring, but it was boring. It was miserable. Now, the players, especially towards the end of the game there, seemed like they were having a pretty good time out there, which is always good to see. I just hate that what I would have thought would have been on a decent weather day, a pretty decent showing by the Auburn fan base for a little bit of new excitement in the program. So I hate that we didn't get to see that, but maybe you never know how all this will shake out and what we can take away from this spring game. But in my eyes, there's really not much. I mean, we can walk through some stats and things like that, but there's just not much to take away solid from the spring game.
Well, my two quick takeaways from a guy that had it on, but was doing various things, including call-in show and talking about it at the same time and looking at NC State and Auburn playing at the same time. And again, people calling and us diverting the conversation all over the college football map. But it's good to know that the players embraced it because at some point, if you're going to be miserable and you're all going to be wet and all that, at some point you just have to say, let's just have fun, and we're going to be sliding through puddles left and right, and you just have to embrace it and say, this is what it is, and we're all in it together. So hey, let's embrace the weather conditions.
Yeah, one of the best moments was right at the end of the game. TJ Finley, slides to avoid. Obviously, they weren't live tackling the quarterbacks, but did a traditional quarterback slide and literally went longer yardage than he ran for because of sliding across the mud pit at that point. So you love to see those type of things. I will say, given the unknown nature of the quarterback situation right now, especially in relation to TJ Finley, it was nice to see him out there having a good time. And you wouldn't think that he'd be out there pouting and things like that. But, the speculation is that he will move on eventually after he graduates. I think even today he was on someone else's show and maybe not, I want to say added fuel to that fire, but just opened up and said, yeah, I mean, if they bring someone in, I'm going to have to look elsewhere if there's an opportunity. And he did say that, he is all Auburn right now, but if there's a better situation for him, then he'd be, crazy not to take it. So all that being said, great to see. I think the mood around the program, even given those circumstances with that game, I walked away with that as a solid takeaway.
And then the football takeaway that I have is exactly what you addressed in TJ Finley sliding further than he ran, is that it becomes an even more difficult evaluation when you've got running quarterbacks in the spring game, because I'm looking at these plays and somebody gets a fingernail on a cleat and, okay, he's down. And the majority of the time I think, I don't think he would have been down. I don't think that defender was going to get a firm grip of a hip or an arm or anything to be able to bring him down. So it's just a difficult thing to judge, especially when you're running those read option plays and the quarterback's getting to the outside and the defender may have had a shot at him, but is able to bring him down based on the tap rule.
Yeah, and look, you've got two different style quarterbacks, mainly talking about Robbie Ashford and TJ Finley. Robbie is known for his speed and his juking ability, and you can't really do that in that type of situation and see what he can accomplish. But on the flip side, even though TJ is not known as the most mobile quarterback, he's a behemoth. 6'7", I think, is what he's listed at. 6'6", 6'7", and he can bowl somebody over if he wants to. So you really can't do that either. So in a situation where you wanted to utilize different style running quarterback, and I wouldn't call TJ a running quarterback, but his style of running, you're not going to get that type of excitement. Now, they did run Robbie a lot, whether that was by design or by just him making a read and deciding it was better to tuck the ball and run. But, you're not going to see a whole lot of that solid and know what these guys can accomplish. And I would have liked to have seen a little bit more throwing of the ball. As it stands, there were only 4 attempts by TJ Finley, 3 by Robbie Ashford. Now, Robbie had one outstanding throw to Tavares Dawson, who has now entered the transfer portal. We can even discuss that if you'd like, some of the departures there. But I would have loved to have seen the ball tossed, even in those conditions, especially in those conditions, frankly, see what these guys can do potentially with the balls a little bit wet, a little bit heavier, and the wide receivers too. I think there were some drops, obviously, because of the conditions, but there was a lot to be desired at the quarterback position, but not necessarily because they played poorly, just because there was not much shown.
Kyle, you bring up the term that everybody's thinking about and is on everyone's mind and has been now for 3 days. April 15th was the day. So the transfer portal. So this is something that I access about 12 times a day during the portal window just to make sure, okay, who's announced and who hasn't. So where do we stand on Auburn? I missed the one entry that you just mentioned.
Yeah, so we've got 4 as it stands at this moment. And as you address this, you have to check this frequently. It could be changing as we speak right now. But before we went live right here, when I came on, there were 4 in the portal for Auburn. The 2 first names, most people aren't going to even know outside of Auburn. Probably even Auburn people know them. Desmond Tisdale and Cameron Brown. Now, Cameron Brown was the brother of just outstanding defensive lineman Derek Brown, who's now in the NFL with the Carolina Panthers. And both of those guys came in kind of as depth pieces for the most part and stayed that way. So they have now moved on to seek other opportunities, and we appreciate their time here with the Tigers. There is another one, and I'll get to Tavares Dawson, that was, I think, a little bit more surprising for Auburn fans, and that is Jeffrey Imba. If you ask Auburn fans, there's not many great things they'll say about the Hudson era. But I think that was one of the good things about the Hudson era, was this particular pickup of the best defensive lineman, JUCO offensive lineman in that recruiting cycle. And in his first season at Auburn, even having a slow start because of coming back from an injury in the offseason, I think he made, maybe statistically, not the most amazing stats out there, but he showed some life, especially if you think back to the Mississippi State game post Harsin. This was Cadillac's first game. He had a forced fumble that kind of shifted the, I hate to use this term, tide for the Auburn Tigers in that game, and potentially set them up to maybe win that game in a big shocker with everything that was going on at that time. So that's a bit of a shock too, that he was leaving, but this is the transfer portal. If somebody sees there's a better situation for themselves, they're going to jump on it and take it. And then the last one, Tavares Dawson, a wide receiver that was highly talked about by Coach Harsin during his time here, and kept saying each year, things we're seeing from this kid, we're going to be utilizing him a lot. And then it just never amounted to anything, whether that was because of by choice of the coaches, things weren't getting done on his end. I don't know that, but he has now entered the transfer portal as well. So that's where we stand right now. 3 defensive guys, 1 offensive guy. I think most people will go ahead and throw in the TJ Finley discussion in there and say that's coming at some point. But that's kind of where Auburn is in the transfer portal at this moment.
Kyle Loomis, E2C Network, tracking everything Auburn. And I mean everything. even off the playing field of football, baseball, basketball. It's the Auburn community, and it's a in-depth look at everything Auburn. Anything in particular that's coming up this week that we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, definitely. If you are an Auburn baseball fan, tonight after the midweek game, we'll be doing a live stream of that. But I always point people to our Wednesday night show at 8 p.m. Eastern time, where you can call in and talk about anything. I mean, usually we stay on the sports and Auburn football topic, but we shift to anything. I mean, right now, I know it seems odd, but Auburn just got a Buc-ee's, the gas station phenomenon, if y'all have ever heard of that. And we are just nonstop talking about that. I even joked on the show the other day that I'm going to add a Buc-ee's jar to my desk right here. And every time I mention or someone else mentioned, we're going to throw like a penny in there or something like that. Cause that's how often we're mentioning it and talking about it. So yeah, we talk about anything. Wednesday night is definitely the show because it's loose and free and call-ins and all that kind of stuff. So I encourage people to check us out on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. here.
Well, I rarely bring up any kind of potential, whether it's a retail outlet or anything, unless they're throwing me money as a sponsor, but I'm a bit curious here. So the regular high-end convenience store aspect of the typical gas station seems to be where it maxes out. So what makes these Buc-ee's so special?
I have no idea, Mark. I'm trying to figure it out myself. My wife is a fanatic. She's got T-shirts in her dresser right now, just falling out of there.
It's the name.
It's the name. It's now look, when you go into this place, bathrooms have been like the cleanest, gas station bathrooms you've ever been in. They have basically a cafeteria where you can get all kinds of, and they're known for their brisket and things like that. It's just one of these phenomenons that has developed, and I think they proudly would be okay with me saying this, a cult following. And so that cult has now started drawing in other people. And when you combine the fanaticism that is the Auburn family with a brand like that, I'm not going to be shocked if that's not one of their best selling stores. And I know that, that's going to be wherever there's a nice avenue through interstates, they're going to do a lot of money in gas alone. But I'm just thinking Auburn football game days with what they sell in terms of smokers and they're going to do so well in Auburn. And I think they're already starting to see that only a week here. So we've spent a lot of time talking about that. And unfortunately, for those people that are regulars on our show, I hope we don't bore them to death with that, but it's going to come up a lot. It's just a weird phenomenon, Mark.
I often belie the cliche that you learn something new every day. And sometimes I get to the end of the day and think, I unfortunately didn't learn anything today, but I did learn about Buc-ee's today.
So, I'm glad I could inform you on that.
Absolutely. I had no idea that this existed. So yeah, I'm gonna go to Google and I want to see the origins of all this and where they're located.
Well, I would push you too if I do a shameless plug here. We did a little bit of a sights and sounds reel from the opening day of Buc-ee's with certain dignitaries. Former head coach Tommy Tuberville, now senator, made an appearance, and there's all kinds of stuff that we have over there on the channel if you'd like a little taste, at least what it's like in Auburn.
Very good. The name Tommy Tuberville always brings back good memories. I guess I would think for Auburn fans, 6 consecutive wins over Alabama and a lot of fine teams and bowl appearances and undefeated season, of course. And for myself, Tommy Tuberville was extremely good to me, and interviewed him many times during his days at Ole Miss and later at Cincinnati as well. In between, obviously, was the peak of his career on the Plains.
Yeah, well, if you think about it too, the ties to Auburn and Ole Miss are happening a lot over the last few decades. With Hugh Freeze now here and his time at Ole Miss, Tommy Tuberville. It's interesting. I think the fondness for Tommy Tuberville outside of politics still is very much at large on the Plains. He has, I think, reached the status of a revered figure now in terms of his what he accomplished on the Plains. Without a national title to his name, that's something to be said. So a couple of SEC titles. So very happy that Tommy is part of our history and happy that he frequents Auburn as much as he can in a very busy schedule these days.
And to his defense, he could only do what he could do in 2003, and that's win every game. So there should be a huge asterisk next to that accomplishment, especially can you imagine in this day and age an SEC team goes undefeated and has no chance, no opportunity to play for a national championship. So he did everything he could. I hope that there's a banner honoring that team in Jordan-Hare Stadium somewhere.
Well, there's been a conversation, and I'll plug somebody else. Michael Scott Nicky wrote the book. I believe the title is Auburn's Unclaimed National Championships, and so he makes a great case for several. And 2004 is one of those cases. And I believe
I'm sorry, I said
yeah,
3, 4.
we knew what you meant. Yeah, but basically, he said that one. He wrote the book before the 2004 season, I believe, and even still was making the case for it then. This was before USC had to vacate all that stuff. So that's a case in of itself, but he really makes a compelling case for the 1993 season. Was it 1983, or I'm getting them all mixed.
You could actually make a case for both of them. I'm nodding my head because the 83 team went 11-1, played the toughest schedule in the country, won the Sugar Bowl against Michigan, and a Miami team that beat Nebraska was elevated above them in the final vote. The 93 team was on probation, but went undefeated.
Yeah, there's a lot of that back there. We're not Alabama. We don't claim every championship that some
no 2-loss championship teams.
None of that. None of that. You'll find maybe a case for a 1-loss team somewhere in there with Auburn. But I unfortunately, right now, the culture doesn't seem to want to. The fans want us to claim those national titles, but I think maybe administration, powers that be, so to speak, don't necessarily want to claim those just because it feels like you're just adding on top of it. Now, that may change over time, but I think certainly 2004, given what's taken place since that time, you've got an Oklahoma team that should never have been in there. You've got a USC team that we now know was cheating on several different levels. And I think Auburn's case for that season speaks for itself, how powerful they were offensively, how powerful they were defensively. I mean, we all talk about Carnell Williams. We all talk about Ronnie Brown, Jason Campbell, Courtney Taylor, all these great offensive people, but they forget how good that defensive team was, dude. This wasn't the 2010 team where you had a behemoth in Cam Newton and a defensive Auburn team that was just kind of doing as much as they could, but still allowing Cam Newton to cook, so to speak. This was a 2004 team that should have played, and in my eyes, and I know I have orange and blue glasses on, should have won the national title.
That season was a perfect example of one of the great fallacies in college football, especially in that day where USC and Oklahoma started the season 1-2 in the services, in the 2 polls. Auburn was like 19th, I think, preseason. That's the number that comes to mind. And basically, there was a thought in mind by most that you didn't necessarily evaluate just the play on the field. As long as somebody kept their pole position, you just kept them there, which is totally ridiculous that you're not evaluating the teams, but you're just basically saying, as long as you win, we don't care if you win by 50 every week or you win by 1, you stay there. And so Auburn basically just climbed all the way up to number 3, and they ran into a ceiling and the other 2 didn't lose. So you just keep them at number 3. That was the flawed logic of most.
Yeah. And I often say, somewhat jokingly, but somewhat seriously, if you're happy about all the changes that have happened in terms of who's in the conversation, maybe moving to playoffs, but expanded playoffs, you can thank Auburn, because I haven't been around that long, but I don't recall a bigger argument year than that 2004 year where Auburn's undefeated and doesn't get into that championship game. I mean, Oklahoma lost, if I'm correct, in their championship game for the conference and still got in. I just don't know how that happens. That's why I think we all get frustrated with these polls at the beginning of the season, what you guys were talking about. I know it's not necessarily a poll, but the FPI and all this stuff, because it's all just talking season. It's fun to discuss, but when it affects something in the outcome of the end of the season and keeps somebody like Auburn in that year out of it, it's very frustrating. And take Auburn out of it if you want to, whoever that person is, that team would be in that conversation. We want to have the best teams out there, no matter who that is. And we hate when outside forces sometimes keep us from seeing those potential games.
So just to clarify, it was in 2003 that Oklahoma lost its Big 12 championship game and still advanced to the BCS championship game. The Oklahoma and USC teams in 2004 were both undefeated.
I knew I had probably had those mixed up a little bit there, but there was something there that just, why was Oklahoma in this game over Auburn? I just remember that.
Well, after getting blasted 55-19, people tend to, and I try to guard against that because the powers that be couldn't forecast what the games were going to be once they were played. So we have to guard against that in particular.
Right.
You may or may not like this exercise that I go through, Kyle, but we're going to display our all-time program rankings here in the next 6 weeks or so. And I keep a running total of, I go in depth. So we'll take Auburn, for example.
Sure.
I've got a running spreadsheet that's got their all-time winning percentage, their conference championships, their national championships, with a caveat. I'll get back to that in just a second. Major bowl wins overall, NFL draft selections, number one selections in the NFL draft, Heisman Trophy winners, major award winners at each position, the whole thing, and then come up with a computation to rank them. The one caveat about the national championships, to me, a conference championship is completely valid based on the system that's in place in each conference to determine a rightful champion. However, I don't just go by AP national championships. I go through every year and I tabulate what I believe should be the national champion. And in many of those years, I've got like 5 national champions because they didn't play. They all went undefeated. They went on their various ways, and I can't differentiate. And 2004 is one of those years.
Yeah.
To me, the national champion is USC, and it's Auburn. There was a national championship for Auburn in 2004, and there's one for Auburn in 1983 and in 1993. I actually produced a video and went through the 1983 season and said Auburn should claim a national championship.
Yeah, I think the case is very strong for it, for all the reasons you just listed, and probably even more than we can get into. It's one of the best Auburn teams that we've ever seen on the field. And to me, we had our stars. We had, Cadillac and Ronnie, and they were great in their time and had decent times in the NFL. But to me, that was an Auburn team where, and not to take anything away from 2010, 1983, and maybe 1993 falls in this category too, but it was less about the stars than more about the team. You've got in 1983 Bo Jackson, which was in the argument in that book, particularly for what should be claimed national title. 2010 speaks for itself with an actual national title in the halls of Auburn's trophy cases. But I love that team so much. I was a teenager when that happened, and so they will always be that special group to me. And it sounds cliche, but they will always be champions to the Auburn family just because of what they came from. 2003 was one of the we've had more miserable seasons since then, but a miserable season because of the expectations, being ranked number 1 preseason and just falling flat in your face. And to come back and do what they did, the way they did it, and to not be able to play for that, it's bittersweet. So we look very fondly upon that team.
Kyle, we appreciate you stopping by, and again, encourage everyone to head on over to E2C Network right here on YouTube and check out Kyle and the rest of the crew there.
Always a pleasure to be here, Mark. Thank you so much.
Have a good week.
You too. Where you go?
All right, let's keep it moving here. The Voice of College Football. We've dropped the link to call the show in the chat a number of times, so if you'd like to jump on board, please do. Also, I am going to go back to the FPI, and we are going to dive into this as soon as I find something to post on the screen. I am not Kyle Loomis. Join the Discord. You can find the link by going to patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV. Patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV. You join the Discord. You talk college football 24/7, 365, just like you are in the chat right now, and more, much more than that, because you can share links, you can share GIFs, you can share all that in addition to the conversation there on Discord. Again, patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV. In addition to that, exclusive content. You get my predictions on the season, my predictions week to week, which are much, 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 much better than most. Grab any non-professional, meaning handicapper or odds maker, and check out their record, and then look at mine. And I did not have an outstanding season this last year, but it was still it still would earn money in Vegas. All right. So again, join us on patreon.com. We've got YouTube memberships. We appreciate the 25 people that are on our YouTube membership list. And this is not up to date, but these are various folks that have joined us here on our YouTube membership list. The Dan Beast Media, Tim Prangley, Joey Foster, Badger, Bournemouth, Jason O, DS, Mike G, Erica Goldberg. Thank you so much. Tim Armstrong, Rex Bryan, Kieta Miura, and DeReal MVP, as well as more recent members coming in. We've got Daniel, we've got Shoelace Sooner, Kenny, Mike G, Will ND. Thank you so much for joining us on YouTube as a premium member, and check out all the perks and benefits that you receive as a Voice of College Football YouTube member. And we have aligned the Patreon experience with the YouTube membership experience, so you don't have to try to determine, okay, Mark told us to become a YouTube member, and he also told us to join Patreon. Now, I don't want to join both. I totally get that. So you can get the same perks at the same level on both platforms, because I didn't want to discount the 75 people on Patreon and totally have them have to redirect to YouTube. And then I also didn't want people that were joining the YouTube membership to have to say, well, they get X, Y, and Z on Patreon, but we don't get that here. No, they align across the board. All right. Before we get to the FPI rankings, and we are going to join Kevin McGuffey's jumping on board here from Last Word on College Football. Kevin, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Mark. We can talk about the FPI ratings if you want.
Oh, let's get into them. I've got them right here. I'll pull them up. I see that Kentucky's at number 28. I didn't do anything beyond that because we've had several guests, so we have yet to completely dive into it here. But what was your initial thought?
I mean, I think 28 probably sounds like a pretty good place to start for the beginning of the season. As you guys were talking, I was listening a little bit before I got on here that this is something fun to help pass the time between now and August when we get into the midst of the football season. But I think it's pretty good. I mean, you see they ranked ahead of Miami, Arkansas. Look, Michigan State ranked ahead of Michigan State. Last time I was on, we talked about the whole Kentucky Michigan State thing. So nice to see them ranked ahead of them. Also Mississippi State. And NC State. Devin Leary's old school. Kentucky's ranked ahead of them. So I think that's probably about right. I think six. If I didn't see the top part of it, but I'm sure there's at least 5 or 6 SEC teams ahead of them, at least.
And just as an interesting note as well, right below NC State is Lewis. We thank you so much for your YouTube membership, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I took Lewis's name off the screen to show that your old friend Iowa is another notch below down there at number 37. So maybe we can go for an unprecedented third consecutive Kentucky-Iowa bowl game.
Please no. Well, let's do it this way. If Kentucky has a fully stocked offensive unit, then I'd say maybe not. Maybe let's try it. Maybe go for the rubber match. Kentucky obviously won the first one. Iowa won last year. So if you've got a healthy Devin Leary, a healthy Ray Davis, or guys aren't just decide to skip the bowl game, I say in that case maybe why not? But otherwise, I really don't want to play Iowa again for I don't know a decade or more, unless something amazing happened and it was like in a college football playoff game or something like that. But let's we won't get too far ahead of ourselves right now on that. So
the projection on the win total is basically 7. It's 7.2 against 4.8. So it's basically 7-5 according to the FPI. How does that strike you?
I'd say that's I think Kentucky's like is 7-5 every year. It's like if you go and look, it's 7-5, and everyone always projects them to the Music City Bowl. But since they played there last year, hopefully that's not an option this year. I think that's good. My first thought, I'm thinking 8-4. I think 7-5. I think would be the ceiling for this year. Not the ceiling. 7-5 would be the basement. Sorry, I got distracted by the words on the screen there. I think 7-5. Anything worse than 7-5 is a failure. And you and I have been talking for years. And when we first started talking, we said Kentucky went 7-5 and would be a quote a bad season. You would have thought I was crazy, or you'd like to have whatever the bourbon or whatever I'd been drinking. So, but no, I think 7-5 is a good starting point. But I think 8-4. Kentucky's schedule is a little harder this year, obviously, than years before, just because of the SEC, where they had at Alabama in this year. So, it's pretty good. Kentucky has a pretty good home schedule. You got Tennessee, Florida, and Alabama all at home this year. So, is that right? Yes, I think that's right. Yeah. So that's pretty good. Pretty good starting point this year. So yeah, 7-5 is, I think is pretty legitimate. I can't argue with that too much at all.
John, thank you so much for grabbing the Last Word on College Football link and posting that to the live chat so you guys can follow Kevin's work and everyone else there at the Last Word on College Football.
Yes, thank you very much for doing that, man. That's awesome. So yeah, like I said, speaking of Last Word, I finished. I've been going through the spring, basically position by position. Just at the linebackers, I'm finishing up this week with the secondary and the kicking game, just kind of throwing all that in there together. And then from there, we'll turn our eyes towards the NFL draft, where, let's face it, Will Levis seems to be one of the more, if not the most polarizing name in this draft this year. So anywhere from I've seen the second or third pick all the way to him falling out of the first round. Just depends on which, it just depends on which site you want to look at. So I saw something this morning that I think it was Caesar's Sportsbook now has him as picked to be the second quarterback drafted, which I don't know that. I still think it's Young and Stroud, and then take your pick after that, whether it's Levis, Richardson, Hendon Hooker. But we will see, and I guess it's about 2 weeks away now. So Kentucky spring football is over for now. The season is over. Spring football is over now. They just have some, just training and whatever, and then get ready for the spring or for the fall. I cannot talk today. Apologize. So I got so many thoughts going here, but anyway, like I said, yeah, the NFL draft is pretty much the big topic of discussion around here right now, as far as football program goes. That, and of course the second transfer portal.
What is your biggest takeaway now that spring practice is over?
The biggest takeaway, I think, Devin Leary, obvious to anyone who's watched him play, I think he's the real deal. He's come in. I think he's taken to the Liam Cohen offense pretty well. And just the biggest thing was getting used to taking snaps under center again. Because you and I talked about this before at North Carolina State, pretty much shotgun all the time. Now he's had to get used to taking snaps under center. The offensive line, one of the biggest bugaboos from last season, still a work in progress. Kentucky has reached out to a couple, so much so that I think Kentucky has reached out to a couple guys in the transfer portal. One of them, let me get the name here. It's a guy from USC who you guys had talked about him on another show. Cortland Ford.
Yeah.
He was offensive tackle from USC, put his name in the portal, and he's got a visit scheduled with Kentucky this weekend. So obviously a tackle position, that right tackle position is still somewhat in a state of flux, for lack of a better term. Kentucky's had several guys in there. But if you could get, he played, started 12 games, just looking at his stats here. He's out of Texas, started 12 games over 3 years there at USC. and including, I think, in the Cotton Bowl was one of his starts. So that's a guy Kentucky's reached out to. So, and he's visiting this weekend. So we'll see what happens there. On the other side of the ball, the defense. Of course, Kentucky didn't have a spring game again because they're putting a new turf in at Kroger Field. The defense, so they did like an 11-on-11 scrimmage, and the defense, kind of dominated the day, honestly, which maybe not too surprising. Like I said, given there's still the offensive line is still a work in progress. So that was kind of the biggest things. Devin Leary, obviously your quarterback one. Ray Davis is going to be the Vandy transfer is going to be your guy replacing Chris Rodriguez. If you can replace Chris Rodriguez, but he's going to be the guy starting the season. And then, like I said, the defense looked really good. So that's just kind of the nutshell from the spring.
Awesome. Great stuff, Kevin. We appreciate you stopping by. You can catch Kevin's work again at Last Word on College Football and those much anticipated bowl projections coming at some point.
Memorial Day weekend.
Memorial Day weekend.
Yes. They give you something to look forward to. So we've got like we have the draft, and then after the draft, I'm pretty much my, 9 to 5 job here at the TV station. That's Kentucky Derby week. So so we do like all day Derby coverage. So, and spend like the whole week getting everything prepared. So won't see a whole lot from me that week. Other than NFL draft wrap up, but then after that, I'm going to start ramping up. And like I said, my goal was to have it for Memorial Day weekend. If I get it done sooner, so be it. But right now I'm shooting for Memorial Day weekend. So for those first bowl projections.
Kentucky Wildcat position breakdowns with Kevin. Those are being released as we speak. And then bowl projections coming out on Memorial Day weekend. All right, good stuff. Catch Kevin's work there at Last Word on College Football, Tony Siracusa, and all of our good friends there.
Yeah.
At Last Word.
We've added a couple of new writers. We've got an Ohio State writer now, and we've got one for Florida. I think we've added Ohio State, Florida State, and one other. I want to say like an LSU writer that we didn't have before. So that's 3 new, for everybody in the Mark Rogers universe, for lack of a better. If you want to, go over there, see if we cover your favorite school, and if not, hey, if you're ever interested in writing about college football, hit the guys up there. They'll be glad to talk to you and give you a tryout if you're so interested. So.
All right, Kevin. Appreciate you being here. Have a good week.
All right. Thanks, Mark. We'll talk to you next week, hopefully. So.
All right. Kevin McGuffey, Last Word on College Football. So let's get everyone squared away on what's coming your way throughout the week here at the Voice of College Football. Just released a Big Ten TV ratings breakdown for 2022. Many people have found that interesting. You most likely will as well. So check it out right here at the Voice of College Football. ESPN's Tom Luginbill, recruiting analyst, will be joining us on Thursday. That's going to premiere Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Tom Luginbill, one of my favorites, one of the most respected voices in college football, one of the most respected analysts and minds in college football, will join us on Thursday. The video will be released, premiering Thursday at 6 Eastern Time. Tom Luginbill. All right. Plenty of content coming out that you'll want to look out for as well. Once spring practice concludes, we're going to unveil our conference power rankings, also position breakdowns and position rankings throughout the nation and connected to each conference. May is great debate month here at the Voice of College Football, so serve up your debate. We will give it a look right here at the Voice of College Football. We've got a long list of debates. We will get to as many as possible, but the louder you are about your debate, the most likely we will take it on right here at the Voice of College Football. And many of those that will involve video breakdown, we will have to, of course, put those on some combination of Patreon and the YouTube memberships so that you folks can enjoy that, and we will not have those taken down here on YouTube. But many of those debates will involve video breakdowns of those particular games and players and events. So again, right here, the Voice of College Football YouTube memberships and Patreon, and we've lined it up so you do not have to be a member of both. So keep that in mind. We appreciate that, and we understand what that concern would have been. He's got YouTube memberships. He's got Patreon. Which do I do? It is up to you, but we have aligned to those, so it is your choice. All right. We also have exclusive content that's going to be unveiled on the USC channel, and more about that upcoming. I wanted to get to these FPI rankings from an SEC angle in particular. So let's get to it. From the top. And I'm probably going to do an FPI breakdown via video. So I will, this is the first look that I've had at these. Haven't really had time to digest these. So I'm looking at the FPI for the first time as you are. I believe they were just released here in the last hour. So again, I most likely, when I get a chance, I've got so many video ideas, and it's these darn team channels that take me away from all these ideas that I have to produce videos, because believe me, I would like to produce at least one video here on the main channel each and every day. But with all the team live streams that we have and all the video content that we've got to produce throughout the day, it's sometimes difficult to produce a video here on the main channel. Alabama's at number 2. Of course, the big question mark there is losing Bryce Young. Jalen Milroe would appear to have maybe a slight advantage for the quarterback position, but there is a quarterback battle, and Jalen Milroe didn't show us much in the passing game last season. However, if he is vying for the Alabama starting quarterback position, think Jalen Hurts, think development, think Alabama does it as well as anyone in the business. He is not going to take the field with Jalen Milroe in September if he is not prepared to be a passing threat. He was not against Texas A&M or against Arkansas. He was strictly a running quarterback that could not throw the ball at the standard of Alabama football. So Alabama sitting at number 2 in the nation, ahead of Georgia. We know about the litany of NFL losses there for Georgia along the offensive line and on the defense in particular. They are stocked at running back. They've got a quarterback to figure out. It's most likely going to be Carson Beck, who was the best quarterback on the field during the Georgia spring game. LSU is ranked as a team that is the 4th best team in the nation, that the FPI has projected to win either 9 or 10 games. And of course, Jaden Daniels back at quarterback. Harold Perkins, one of the best defensive players in the nation. And LSU will vie for the SEC Western Division Championship. They will have to go to Tuscaloosa. And again, the FPI, as I understand it, of course, is just ranking the teams based on their ability and the projection of how good the team is, simply how good the team is, not matching it up against the schedule until you look at the record projection, which of course is against the schedule. Meanwhile, in the SEC, we don't see another team pop up until the Tennessee Volunteers at number 12, replacing Hendon Hooker at quarterback with most likely Joe Milton, and losing most of their wide receiver core, especially their 2 standouts in Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman, to the NFL draft. We would expect Tennessee to be better on defense this year. And then further down in the SEC, Ole Miss comes in at number 16. They have quite the quarterback battle, maybe the most diverse quarterback battle in regards to just number of experienced and talented players in one room, with Luke Altmaier departing for Illinois, who may be the starting quarterback there. In his place, you got Walker Howard in from LSU. You've got Spencer Sanders, who compiled a ton of statistics as Oklahoma State's quarterback forever. And despite some turnover issues from Spencer Sanders, big physical player, outstanding arm, not necessarily the most accurate passer in college football. And again, turnover issues out of Spencer Sanders at Oklahoma State. And then the incumbent, Jackson Dart. Quinshad Judkins was one of the big surprises in college football at running back for Ole Miss. But they, of course, took a severe downturn late in the season after starting 7-0 and 8-1. And were blown out in their bowl game and stumbled down the stretch. Texas A&M at number 19, of course, the mercurial program of college football with the great recruiting classes, and even that number one class that has been much criticized as mostly departed. That's not necessarily the case. They have had key departures off that recruiting class, but much of it still remains intact. Texas A&M mighty impressive on the roster. However, it's been a defense-heavy team, and they have a quarterback situation which you would expect Connor Weigman will take over as the guy. He was the better player over Max Johnson last season. A&M, according to the FPI, at number 19. Elsewhere in the SEC, the aforementioned Kentucky Wildcats at number 28 and new quarterback Devin Leary from NC State. Arkansas, we took the deep dive with Ty Hudson a few minutes ago. Arkansas at number 30. Mississippi State, a new coach, Zach Arnett, and record-setting quarterback Will Rogers, who could, with a decent average season, a healthy season out of Will Rogers, will leave college football as one of the most prolific quarterbacks in the history of the game. Mississippi State at number 32. Elsewhere in the SEC, we see Auburn pop up at 39, Missouri at 40. Both of those teams have quarterback situations that aren't necessarily in the best shape. Missouri's got 5 quarterbacks in play, and they finished up their spring practice earlier than anyone else. Brady Cook, the incumbent, is trying to fend off 4 other quarterback possibilities, including Jake Garcia coming in from Miami. We also see from the SEC, South Carolina at number 42, Spencer Rattler's back after a pretty subpar most of 2022. He came on late, as did the entire team against, of course, Tennessee and Clemson. Then out to round out the SEC. Who's left? I don't think it would be anybody else but Vandy. And Vandy is sitting at number 73. There's the SEC. I will pick off any comments and questions that you have before we wrap it up here at the Voice of College Football. Lewis, again, thank you so much for joining us as a YouTube member. And I want to emphasize to everyone out there as a YouTube or Patreon member that, and I sent this notification or this letter out to all the Patreon members in particular. I don't know that there's a way to do it on YouTube. Just to let everyone know that we are here for your requests and your recommendations. So if there's any issue that you're having or any kind of suggestion that you have that could make your membership better, we are always open to those suggestions. I believe if I can find the time in my day that I am going to attack these FPI rankings, and we will get after that sometime here, but I've got so many other things to do. My goodness, to get us set for all sorts of things that we want to release here in the next few days, including 2023 program rankings. I have been meaning to get those out soon because we want to follow up the program rankings release video with a live stream in which we get all of your feedback and calls to come in to talk about the program rankings. Join us on Discord. Again, go to patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV. We can sponsor you, whether that's you as an individual, so you can do a personal sponsorship here at the Voice of College Football, whether that's just to help us grow and build the channel, or whether you want it to benefit your own personal brand or platform, or, of course, if you've got a business or are connected to a business that can benefit from sponsorship, we want to let you know how we can bolster your brand and your business. Just hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. All right, everyone. Next show, Iowa Hawkeyes Live with Corey Bratta, coming up at 5:30 Eastern Time, 4:30 Central, as we preview the Iowa spring game. And that's coming up at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central, over on the Iowa channel, right here, the Voice of College Football. We will see you in a few hours.